Bismillah Rahmanir Rahim. We are here again, and with one outstanding speaker is with us, Mr. Mark Millar, who is the global president of ACCA. And the topic of our conversation is new models of public procurement, a tool for sustainability recovery. This is an exclusive session with ACCA. ACCA is partnering with Nutshell Group and Martin Dow Group for Leaders in Islamabad since 2017. And I recall that the global president of ACCA, Mr. Brian, also participated in the first edition, followed by the global CEO, Helen Brand, and many other speakers. So our association is very long, and in different conferences in Pakistan and abroad, we collaborated both in person and virtually. And I especially requested that the Mark Millar should be with us for this session in the fourth edition of Leaders in Islamabad. Today is the second day of Leaders in Islamabad Summit. Yesterday, all of you enjoyed different sessions, but right now we are hosting one conversation with Mark Millar. This will be followed by another 1 hour conversation with ACCA global members from different parts of the world. So this is exclusive between Nutshell, Martin Dow, and ACCA. So I want to introduce Mark Millar. He is a proud public sector accountant and leader. Mark joined the NHS from his school and studied for the ACCA qualification rather than going to university. Over a 45-year career, he has held a variety of finance director roles in the NHS and has been chief executive of a number of NHS and public bodies, as well as contributing to national policy. In 2001, Mark was chairman of the UK Healthcare Financial Management Association, promoting the role of accountant in the healthcare. Very interesting, by the way. Following NHS career, Mark spent 5 years as chief executive at St. Elizabeth Hospice and a non-executive director of Royal Pepworth Hospital NHS Foundation Trust for 7 years. He retains an interest in the NHS through chairing funding appeal panels. Mark is also trained in both mentoring and mediation. He's long been involved with our UK Health panel and served on our, ACCA's International Assembly for 2 terms. Mark has served on ACCA Council since 2010. So, Mark, over to you on your topic, new models of public procurement, a tool for sustainability recovery. 20 minutes talk from your side, and then we will take few questions from the audience. Over to you, Mark.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be able to have this opportunity to speak to you a few words. I'm really grateful and send special greetings to Azfar Ahsan as Chief Executive of National Conferences and the founder of Corporate Pakistan Group, as well as to the many distinguished guests in the audience. It's a real pleasure. And as you've heard, there's a long association with ACCA, and we're very proud to partner with you in these and other events and initiatives. So the title of my remarks today might seem a little long and a little complicated. New models of public procurement, a tool for sustainable recovery. But in reality, it's really quite simple and goes to the heart of the questions that face societies everywhere. And it's this: how do we build economic recovery from COVID-19 that works for everyone? What role does public spending play alongside private investment in fueling that recovery? And how do we get the best value from public funds so that people feel that the system and their government is working in their best interests? And for me, it comes down to trust. Trust between people and government. And that trust has to be based upon transparency and on honesty. And this is an issue that is so important to me personally. As you've heard, I worked my whole life in the public sector, mostly in public health. And I am well aware of the men and women who dedicate their careers to public service. And in my head, they're a special breed indeed. And I know the full worth and importance of work done by public servants. And I believe that a vibrant public sector in investing resources in projects and services that benefit all people is a sign of a strong, stable and caring society. It's the arena where people gather to get things done, to make society better for everyone. Building the infrastructure, growing the social capital, and doing jobs which don't necessarily generate profit, but are priceless in sustaining a community. So even in economies which place free markets first, still need a strong public sector, where the profits of successful business help sustain a healthy environment, a strong infrastructure, and vital services that make society work. Too often, you hear commentators suggest that we must choose somehow between the public and the private sector. They talk as if we should prefer one to the other, to pick sides, if you like, as though it were a cricket match. This is a big misconception, that all enterprise and energy is in the private sector, and the public sector is where you find the worthy workaday types doing essential, though routine tasks. In my head, all of that is nonsense. In truth, every society needs a vibrant public sector and a vibrant private sector to function. We need both, fueling each other, private and public, one hand washing the other. But I know that some of these outdated attitudes, public versus private, still linger. And ACCA has research which points to a credibility gap and a trust gap between sectors. It's in our report, not surprisingly entitled New Models of Public Procurement, a Tool for Sustainable Recovery. And what it says is that many in the private sector don't trust the public sector to uphold its side of the deal in business, for reasons which change according to geography. But in general, they point to flawed public procurement processes and patchy audit practices, largely caused by, if you like, the need for speed amid the supply emergencies and particularly the shortage resources caused by COVID-19. Now, it's quite a broad brush report, but it does highlight a growing demand for greater accountability in public spending and greater insistence on public value. And that shouldn't alarm anyone. They are positive aspirations, and every public sector finance professional embraces them, I am sure. And these demands are also right there in line with everything that ACCA has stood for since we were founded in 1904. Our mission has been to create an accountancy profession that serves as a force for public good. Now, as I'm sure you will know, ACCA is a deeply practical organisation. We don't just ask tough questions, we answer them too. So you wouldn't be surprised to hear that we have framed our own response to the concerns about public procurement. Our report includes a call to publish public contracts early on, centralised open databases accessible to all, that transparency piece. We also go further by demanding that public contracts should be used as a vital economic tool for sustaining struggling businesses, particularly small and medium enterprises who have been hardest hit by COVID. I picked up a phrase at an event some while ago now about a decreasing awareness that businesses are for a purpose rather than just for a profit. And that resonates so much at ACCA, where core to our very being is this concept of public value. And public value must be the priority in our decision-making processes. And the more that we can do about bringing that vision to reality in strengthening trust in the public sector, the better it is for everyone. So we have to admit that the public sector faces enormous challenges in every country at the moment. The level of expenditure on public services is enormous, even in countries which you wouldn't think of as having a large public sector. In fact, government expenditure accounts for more than 1/3 of GDP in most countries. Globally, public services are changing rapidly, and the demands upon them are growing, together with the tax bill to pay for them. Governments around the world are wrestling with a huge number of difficult and complex issues. A global pandemic, aging populations, rocketing healthcare costs, urgent reforms of welfare support, as well as provision of education, climate change, defence costs, protection of natural resources, terrorism, crime and infrastructure costs. The list can be endless. At the same time, public expectations for the quality of public services are growing, and people are quite rightly also demanding more accountability and transparency around how public funds are used. In the view of ACCA, it is more important than ever that governments grasp the need to professionalise the public sector finance function in order to tackle these challenges. Through improved public financial management and the adoption of the international reporting standards, good governance and a proper independent audit function. ACCA also supports the adoption of the international accounting standards, which are increasingly vital in a digitalized, universally connected global economy, where borders are becoming largely irrelevant. ACCA believes that we must embrace a new way of keeping score when we assess value for money in public projects. This means adopting reporting measures which take into account the returns and benefits to society over the life of an investment, rather than the immediate budget cost only. Only by accounting in this balance sheet way can we ensure long-term value and sensible investment that is guided by the needs of society over a longer time span than a financial reporting period, or indeed the duration of a particular government. It goes without saying, I think, that the spectre that has haunted all investment decisions and all business activity over the year and more has been the pandemic. COVID-19 demanded the greatest public sector intervention in our societies and our economies I've ever seen. To safeguard both the lives and livelihoods, governments have had to react quickly under enormous pressure to protect citizens from the worst impacts of the emergency. Because the crisis was so acute, normal decision-making processes were speeded up, which increased the risks of corruption, mismanagement, and waste. The pandemic also raised troubling questions about global inequality, with developed nations racing to find and distribute vaccines and healthcare to their own populations, whilst developing nations were left on the outside looking in. This really brought into sharp focus the truth that huge inequality poses a threat to the whole world, not just to poor nations. Where the virus is unchecked, variants can mutate, which threatens the effectiveness of the vaccines being deployed elsewhere. The brutal, salient fact of a pandemic is that until everyone is safe, no one is. It's also true that this damaging inequality is a threat beyond the boundaries of healthcare. It also brings greater danger of mass transcontinental migrations, geopolitical instability, and even potential wars. Sensible public spending and investing in society offers a welcome solution to attaining more equality for more people across the world. Infrastructure is clearly vital for economic and social development everywhere. Transport infrastructure is a valuable economic asset because it allows people to travel to work and to transport goods to different markets. Power and utility systems provide us with the energy and services we need to survive. We all rely on infrastructure systems to ensure that our basic human needs are met. And ACCA believes that accountants can play a critical role in closing this infrastructure gap by improving the selection, financing, and delivery of infrastructure projects. And finally, public sector funding and spending is such an important issue because it protects the interests of a healthy, stable, and well-functioning society. We should all remember the truth based on the bitter experiences of history, that distrust, denial of investment, a lack of faith in the power of the public sector is a sign of a society in trouble. Wherever and whenever we have seen leaders stand up and declare that the public sector is rotten, corrupt, or incapable of serving the people, we have inevitably seen a slide to tyranny and restrictions on freedom. So this is why leaders from all sectors have a responsibility to promote and support public spending that reflects the needs and desires of society. We must all use our influence to ensure that public funds are used for the good of all people in a spirit of openness and transparency, with a dedication to value for money and for public good. I believe that this is how we strengthen civil society, how we build stronger, more sustainable communities, and grow a more sustainable economy. It is how we make sure that wise public investment serves as a powerful tool in our recovery from all the trials that we have all faced in the last year and a half. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mark, for your sharing your views on this important subject. And we are receiving several questions from the audience. I want to share with the participants that this conference is live since yesterday on Facebook pages of ACCA and Nutshell Group, and also the YouTube channel of Nutshell Group, and also the live share with Pakistan Stock Exchange Facebook page and Martin Dow Facebook page. To Mark, first question is from our friend Nadeem Malik. He is the director of Oracle Corporation in Pakistan and also the member of Prime Minister's task force on IT and telecom. And he's asking that globally, relationships and contracts between public and private sectors operate with a trust deficit. How can this be overcome in the context of a developing nation like Pakistan, which is aiming to reap the Gen Z dividend, which is approximately 60% of our population? Yes, Mark, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think probably the first thing I ought to do is to say, actually our research says, yes, there is this trust deficit. And we got to that conclusion by surveying over 1,000 ACCA members from both the public and the private sector across 90 countries. And it's this research that identified this trust deficit between the public sector buyers and private sector suppliers. Now, some of this is around the challenges that governments around the world have faced around public procurement, not least of all because of the COVID-19 crisis, which tested their ability to be agile, react quickly and efficiently to deliver for their people. But what we found is that only 41% of private sector respondents believe that the public sector can be trusted to uphold its side of the deal. And that compares with 60% of public sector respondents stating that they trust their private sector counterparts. So this distrust, I think, has been exacerbated by this need for speed. But that's not the only part of that. But it does prompt you to say that we need to tackle, if we're going to modernize this system, we need to deal with the issues of transparency and real or perceived bribery and corruption. And key to this are that audits should be commonplace in all public procurement procedures, beginning as early as possible in the bid process, because that reduces the likelihood of corruption, and that auditors need to remain independent within that process. I also think that some of this trust is particularly, and I mentioned this in my my address, is also centered around small and medium enterprises, which are vital. So in any economy, it's the small and medium enterprises that are the engine, if you like, for economic recovery, economic development, the payment of taxes that brings, and therefore the ability to invest in the infrastructure and in the public services. So the other side of that coin is about the public sector treating those companies fairly and equitably. And certainly in the UK, we have been launching and talking about campaigns around, for instance, simple things like prompt payment, around actually, cash flow for any new business is really important. And we have to ensure that we are supporting those people. But public trust is what is really important around this, yes, rather than supply. And public trust is that intangible in many ways that can only be helped by being open and transparent and finding ways for those of us who are in the public sector to be demonstrably reporting to and accountable to the people we actually serve, i.e. the public. So we might think we're serving, the government or whatever, but actually we need to have a mindset about we are spending money that our colleagues in our village, town, our neighbours have given us to try and make things better for them and their lives. So the key to it for me is about transparency, and that mindset about accountability.
Okay, thanks for your very detailed answer. And another question is from our another participant, Farhan Ahmed. He's the head of communications of Habib Bank Limited, HBL, and he's also the president of Communication Society of Pakistan. He's asking that in today's post-COVID world, how, in your view, can any government give more transparency to its citizens on credible utilization of public funds?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I suppose the first thing is I'm delighted that word transparency was used in that question, because I think that plays into what I'm trying to go. So I'm really delighted about this, because taxpayers need to know where the spend is happening. That's what I mean by transparency in this context, and this is where state audit comes into play. And it's vital. I mean, it's particularly vital in turbulent times, but it is vital. And the supreme audit institutions are really vital to this. And we work with many of these institutions across the globe and encourage collaboration on key issues. And so what we've seen is that these are essential to holding governments to account in how they spend and allocate resources. Now, clearly, to do that, they have to have some degree of being independent from government. So they need to be able to maintain that strong and independent voice for them to have credibility with the general public. So we produced yet another report. I'll probably end up quoting several reports around auditing the pandemic, transparency, accountability, and inclusiveness in the use of emergency funding. And we partnered with the IDI to highlight the work of SDIs in this time of crisis. So what we did was we explained the essential role of auditors general in ensuring accountability of public funds against COVID-19 pandemic spend. Obviously, because that level of spend and the speed of the spend is unprecedented. And recognizing that governments have had to react quickly and under significant pressure to protect both the economies and citizens' lives. So we all understand that. So we have published some resources as part of that work, a toolkit, if you like. And it talks about 3 policy briefs. One is leave no one behind, is that COVID-19 exacerbated, as I said earlier, exacerbated inequalities, many of which were overlooked when socioeconomic packages to tackle the impacts of the pandemic were first developed and implemented. And public audits can help shed light on whether the legislative and regulatory frameworks that have been put into place account for those inequalities. So this is about helping everyone, building back better, if you like. I've mentioned quite a few times the procurement at speed issues, and certainly where I live in the UK, you know, there are daily stories about the nature of some of the contracts let, the value for money of them, the speed of them, and so on. And that this is work which is wider than and deeper than keeping receipts. So the third stream of this toolkit is about being beyond keeping receipts, about at a time of crisis, accountability and transparency, we understand, tend to take a back seat. And that makes the public audit a more difficult undertaking. However, if we are to maintain public trust and protect public funds and retain confidence, we must ensure that there is a clear audit trail and be accountable about why we took the decisions we took with the knowledge and the pressures at the time, and not try and rewrite history around all of that. So we see that as part of this, the use of this audit and the supreme audit institutions as a vital part of that transparency. However, the other side of that is we all need to be better at finding ways of connecting information in a way that the public can engage with and is relevant to them with the audits and the action being taken. That connection about, you know, so it's a communication exercise as well as a transparency exercise. So the two things need to go along together. And you know, at ACCA, you know, we strongly believe that all of this is also tied in with the UN sustainability goals, which I won't talk a lot about now. But there is a connection for us around progress against and accountability for strategic development goals, and the same issues about transparency and accountability around public procurement and public spending. This is our fellow citizens' money that we are spending, and we need to be transparent about it.
Okay, so there are many questions we are receiving, but I'm asking last 2 questions and want quick answers because the time is short now.
Okay.
20 minutes.
I get the message.
One question is from China. He's my American friend based in China, Professor Michael Sung. He's one of the founders of FinTech Institute at Fudan University. And he's asking that COVID has accelerated the awareness around the need to continuously manage change and mitigate business and economic uncertainty. What, in your opinion, are the lessons for governments on expanding focus?
So, I mean, I've talked at length, haven't I, about transparency, accountability, and inclusiveness. But of course, there is also, and I touched upon it again in my remarks, the issue about capability. So we do need to get away from a perception out there around the standards, the talent, the energy, the capability of those working in, particularly if I'm thinking now obviously of accountants working in the public sector. I believe very much that there are lessons that the public sector need to learn from the private sector. But I also believe there are lessons the other way around. And I think actually more interaction between the two. So let me give you one or two examples. So in terms of what the public sector needs to learn, I find very little of the public sector that actually takes the balance sheet approach that I mentioned, that actually says, if we are making an investment in infrastructure, what's the long-term economic and social value of that, rather than just what's the annual spend or what's in the life of the parliament. So the selection, management and processing of social investment, if you like, are skills which we need to get more of into the public sector, because I think that will help with some of the issues about transparency and so on. On the other hand, there are more and more business owners who recognize that it isn't just about profit, that it is about their place in the world and what their purpose is, and the need to embrace integrated reporting, to embrace the UN Development Goals, and be accountable and report on those things as well. So I think there is a lot that we need to, you're back to the cricket team. We need to be merging the talents, if you like, because we're all cricketers, and we might even swap teams at some point. So national teams might be a bit difficult, but we need to learn from each other. It needs to be a learning environment. And my biggest lesson, because your question was about what are the lessons for governments, is about rigor in the investment decisions that they take, and not short-termism, but an acknowledgement that there are bigger things in play as well. Sorry.
Okay, so one last question, and this is from Ms. Shazia Isfazadi. She's educationist and director of Bloomfield School Systems. She's asking that government and public sector expanding is the backbone of any economy. How, in your view, government expanding policies and processes can promote an inclusive, competitive, and sustainable economic value chain to support SMEs, startups, and women-owned businesses? This is the last question, and I want a brief answer from your side.
Okay. Well, again, I'm delighted with the question, because I did touch upon this in my address. So I'll try and you want a brief answer, so I'll try not to repeat that. But these businesses, are the engine room. They are the powerhouse, and it is inherently risky and difficult starting. So policy decisions by government need to be in place to tackle issues such as late payment that I mentioned, and provide a positive climate, because you won't get the reality is you will not get a strong public sector with the level of resources and investment if you don't have a strong private sector providing employment and generating profits. I can't emphasize enough, the two go hand in hand. So everything that governments can do to promote new businesses and give incentives around that, I think is absolutely vital. There is a report that ACCA published yesterday on medium-sized enterprises, that talked about that. And ultimately, startups and SMEs need that space to grow and support. So we've talked about go through a number of incubators set up either by governments or the private sector, whether they be financing, training, hybrid financing, innovative partnerships between government and the private sector and the new start. The bit about women-owned businesses, in a way, I don't want to comment on, because in a way I don't. I encourage. Don't get me wrong. I encourage women-owned businesses, but But I think, you know, the things that are required are common to both genders. You know, and so I think, you know, women should be given a fair shot at this, and encouraged. But I would say no more than that on that particular subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Wonderful session with you. Your thoughts on new model of public procurement. And ladies and gentlemen, this session is available on YouTube channel of Nutshell Group, and also available on the Facebook pages of ACCA, Martin Dow, Nutshell Group, and also Pakistani Stock Exchange. And we will love to host you in person next time. Mark, please take care, and thanks for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, after 1 minute break, we will start the new session with the other top panelist and other topic. And thank you for your participation, Mark, and all the participants from all over the world. Thank you again.
Delight. Thank you.
Thank you.